Hey everyone, welcome to Kevin's One Stop Shop. Today I have here an '02 Dodge Grand Caravan rack and pinion steering. The old one was leaking, and so I decided I was going to go ahead and replace the rack and pinion with a whole new one. And this is basically what I have. With looking at it, it looks identical to the old one. If you look at the flat spot on the steering on this one and compare it with this one, they're pretty much almost the same. I've got the housing pretty much lined up exactly the same. And one thing you'll notice is there's no nut on the old one. I've removed the outer tie rod and screwed it back on to my reference point that I made a center line to, just so that I could use this old one as a reference to the new one. Of course, I've got the lines that I could have used as well with the new one, but I wanted to just make sure that I had the lines and, of course, compared it to the old one. In order to get the outer tie rod on the old one back to the same point so I would have a reference, I counted the turns off and then screwed it back on the same amount of turns, and you can see it lined up. And then I did the same thing, of course, over here on this side. Same thing, loosened up the nut, unscrewed it the same amount of turns, screwed it back on, made it back to my reference point, plus I screwed it on the same amount of times that it come off. So now with my new one, once I install the new outer tie rod, then I will be able to reference end to end and center to center, and see that it's the same. One other thing is before I took this out, I made sure and secured the steering wheel, because without it being hooked up to the rack and pinion, the wheel would just spin freely, and the little clip would most likely break in the steering wheel, and then you would have another project. But anyway, really about the only other concern I have right now is, since the wheel's secured, it can't turn, everything looks the same, but one thing that I wanted to make sure of was make sure that this part was not a full turnout from the old one. So what I figured the best way to do this was, even though everything looks exactly the same, was I was going to count the turns clockwise and counterclockwise till it stops and see if my new one does the same. So first of all, we start out with the old one, and what I did was I made me like a little black line, I guess you could say north to south, just as a reference point for turns. You could have used a flat spot, but I just felt it might be a little bit easier to use the black line. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this thing and count the turns. So there's a half, there's one, and almost 1.5. So what I did was I wrote a reference down for 1.25 clockwise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this thing back. That's almost my half. So now I'm to 1. Now I'm to half. Now I am back where I started, and you can see, if you look at my mark that I made earlier, yes, I am right back where my mark was. So now let's go ahead and go counterclockwise and see how far this one goes. So here we go. Half, 1, 1.5, about 1 3/4. So I've made another reference, 1 3/4, 1.75. So that's the way it went counterclockwise. So now let's put it back where it was. So now I'm at 1.5, 1, half, and now back to 0. And you can see it's still north to south, and I am right back at my reference point. So we got 1.75 one direction and 1.25 the other direction. So now let's take the new one and see how that works out. So first way I'm going to go, as you can see, I got my little north to south line. It's kind of hard to see on the camera. But anyway, I'm going to go fully clockwise on this one, see where it stops. This one's a little bit harder to turn, so bear with me. So there's a half. There's 1. See if I can get the rest of this turn out of this thing. See if I can trade hands here. So there's pretty much my 1 and almost a half. So now let's go back to put it at 1, half, and back to 0. So I'm gonna do that one more time just because my glove kind of got in the way and you couldn't see it. So now we're back where we were. So let's try it. Let's try it clockwise one more time. There's our half. There's our 1. Oh, and almost 1 and a half. So this was almost 1 and a half, and you can see that 1 and a quarter is what I wrote down. It's a little bit more than 1 and a quarter, but anyway, it's the same. So now I'm gonna come back to my 1, to my half, and now back to 0. Straighten up. All right, so basically what I did was I pretty much verified that this new one is pretty much the same way going clockwise as the other one was. But just like I say, to back ourselves up one more time, let's take it counterclockwise and see where we wind up. So this should be about 1.75. So there's our half. There's our 1. There's our 1 and a half. And there's our 1.75. Once again, 1.75. So now let's take this back clockwise, leave it alone, and put it back together. So we're at almost 1 3/4. So that's now 1 and a half. Take this thing back, that's 1. Now that's a half. Now that's 0. And if you can see, they're lined up north to south, both flat spots are the same. And so the way it come out of the box, it just so happened to be lined up pretty much the way I need it to be. But I just wanted to double check. So I'm going to install the outer tie rod ends, and I will get back to you shortly. Okay, so I've got the outer tie rod ends put on the rack and pinion, and I've got everything lined up pretty much as good as I can see. But anyway, so here's the outer tie rods. You can see, and I've tightened up the nut on both ends. And I've tried to center this, center with that line, and center with the old outer tie rod end. And I've done that on both. Now, I'm pretty convinced it's close enough. I mean, it's probably not perfect. I mean, I don't have an alignment machine here. But I am convinced that from what I see now that it's good enough that it's going to get me to the alignment shop to get it lined up. I could probably drive it for a while like it is, but might as well just put tires on this thing not too long ago, so no need to wear out the tires. But anyway, I was going to show you a couple things under this van. I've seen several different videos, and I've tried a couple different things, but you can see this pan, brace, thin, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, I tried to do this without removing that pan brace, that thin sheet metal, and I wound up realizing I was not going to be able to do this. I could have, but it was going to be a lot more difficult, so I just wound up taking this brace off after the fact. It would have been a lot better if I had taken it off at the beginning. I could have saved myself a lot of headache and time. But you can see this little canister here too. This is on the driver's side, under the driver's side floorboard. This little canister has 4 bolts that holds it in. But if you take it off, it will give you easy access to both of the hydraulic lines going in the rack and pinion, as well as it will give you access to the big bolt that runs up through the driver's side part of the rack and pinion. There's a big bolt that goes up from the bottom up, has a big nut on the top, and once you remove that canister, you can pretty much look right up through the hole, see the nut and the 2 hydraulic lines. So do yourself a favor, take this plate off, take that canister off. There's a few other things under there that come off, but it's very minor. But I just know I fought with this thing, and I wish I had just went ahead and taken it off to begin with. But I'm gonna try to roll under here and give y'all a view of what I'm looking at. About as far as I can zoom out, but right here, that's the big bolt where it's going to hold the rack and pinion. And then there's 2 more holes over here. So what I was saying before is there's a canister. Now I'm basically looking at this from straight underneath. And if you go back just a little bit, this is going towards the rear of the vehicle, there's a canister that goes right around in here. You can see the hoses that hook up to it. But it goes back it's on the driver's side a little bit back past the rack and pinion. But if you take that off, that will allow you to be able to look up through here. I don't know how well you can see, but here's your 2 hydraulic lines that are going to go to the top of the rack and pinion. So it gives you easy access to those lines, as easy as it can be. And also right up there, if you look kind of right up in this area, I won't get my hand in the way, but anyway, you'll be able to see that nut that's on the bolt that holds the driver's side of the rack and pinion up. So do yourself a favor. Take the black brace down, if you can tell anything, and remove this canister. Here's one of the hoses that go to it. Take this canister down and take this plate down, because it's going to save you a lot of headache and aggravation. Because what I did was I got the rack and pinion dropped all the way down from this area right here. You can see I was able to drop it down, but right here, the spline where the steering column attaches, it wouldn't drop far enough down to be able to go left and right of this hole. So it wound up hitting the pan. So now I had to refasten the rack and pinion back up, hold it long enough for me to take the whole pan out when I should have just took it out to begin with. Anyway, I hope that y'all can see a little bit by that video. I know it's kind of close and it's hard to tell, but I just want to give y'all some insight on take the bottom plate off, give yourself some room. It don't take that long, and save yourself a headache the way I did by trying to get around that. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get this thing back up in the van, and I will get back with you shortly. Alright, so now we're back up under the van, and what I've got is that canister that I was talking about before. I don't know how well you can make this out, but anyway, this canister is located under the driver's side. There's the front of the vehicle. Coming back. Here's that big canister. There's 2 look like 3/4 inch lines that come off of it. But anyway, it's got 2 bolts on the driver's side, and then I think there's 1 or either 2 on the passenger side. I can't remember, but I'm just putting it up there just so you can have it as a reference point. But anyway, if you'll take this down right here, this canister, it's right under the driver's seat. If you'll take it down, it will basically stand by. Alright, sorry about that. I had to take a quick time out. But anyway, so if you'll look where this canister was, it exposes those lines to where you can see both of the hydraulic lines that go into that power stick. So that's your little part that goes rack and pinion, and then you can see your 2 hydraulic lines right there. It exposes to them. And if you look right here, sorry, my light on my phone's gone out, but anyway, if you look at that, you can see that nut sticking up right there under them hydraulic lines. That's that nut that goes to the big bolt that's holding the power stick, that's holding the rack and pinion up. So once again, take this canister down, and it will expose both hydraulic lines. They're pretty easy to get to. And then, like I say, you can see that nut right there in the bottom part of the picture. That's the nut you're going to need to get to the hole for the rack and pinion. But I just want to show this to you real quick, just to show you how taking that box out of the way can expose a lot more room. All right, I'm back for one more final time. I've got everything pretty much buttoned up underneath. One thing I wish I had showed you at the beginning, but I had forgotten about it. There is an access hole. It's kind of between the pedal and the brake, the accelerator pedal and the brake pedal. There's a boot, if you can see it, that you can remove. I believe it was 3 screws. And if you look real close, you can see well, the rack and pinion comes up for the steering column to tie into. So before you get started, I'm not sure exactly if there's any other way to do it, but this was the way that I chose to do it. Was I found this hole, and when I did, I thought, hey, this was perfect. So there may be another way to do it, but anyway, look in the firewall behind the accelerator brake pedal, and you'll see this access place that lets you get right to the steering column. There's a pin you'll have to drive out. It's a little bit aggravating, but anyway, it's there. But anyway, I hope this video does you some good. Maybe it'll save you some time. I know I spent a bunch of time on this. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hard job. It's somewhat time consuming. But just to recap, take the boot up under the firewall out so you can access the steering column. Then next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get that big plate out from up under the from up underneath. That's going to give you access to a lot of things. Then take the canister out. The canister will give you access to the big bolt on the driver's side as well as the hydraulic lines. Hope this helps out some. Leave me some comments if you would like. Hope this video works out once again, and y'all have a great day. Thank you.